Hey everyone, Andrew here, and today I'm going to be doing something smidge different, because I don't typically read this kind of book, but I read it for the book club, and I kind of wanted to talk about it for two reasons. The first is because this is a style I don't normally read, so how would I do a review of it? But also because I've been coming across a lot of stories a lot like this lately, so I kind of wanted to talk and compare and look at different ones. So I just read a book that was called A Stolen Life, a memoir by Jaycee Dugard, and it is a real-life telling of one of the longest kidnap victims of all time, Jaycee Dugard, who got kidnapped at age 11, didn't get rescued for basically, 17 years? I've also come across two other stories that are kind of similar. One was a Lifetime movie called I Am Elizabeth Smart, which was another real-life kidnap victim, although she was only missing for like 11 months, but similar lines, similar things. And just last year, I watched a BBC show called 13, which was about a girl who got kidnapped at 13 and didn't get out until she was 28. And I believe that one is entirely fictional. Yeah, it's a super short series. It's like 5 episodes long. It's not great, but it had some stuff in it. Is when I read this and I came across it and I was trying to think of how to do a review on it, it's one of those ones I can't really say how to review it, because I can't compare it to the books I tend to read, which is fiction. It's like I can't base it like, oh, it jumped around in the plot all over the place. It's like, yeah, because it's a remembering, it's a recall, it's a going back into the darkest part of your life and remembering details of it. And it's like, and then parts of it got a little stagnant. It's like, yes, because she was kidnapped for over 10 years. And after a certain point, everything becomes repetitive and the same, because you're not allowed to go out and barely allowed to watch television. It's like I can't rate it based off of narrative or a story flow or the rise and fall of action or the character development, because it's a memoir. It's not a book. But is it a book that needs to exist? Is it a story that needs to be told? And the obvious answer is yes. If for no one else, then for Jaycee Dugard. Because after something that traumatic and that horrible, you need to get it out. You need to do something to move forward and move on with your life. And doing something like that is writing a book about it and getting it out. This is what happened to me, and this is why I am the way I am, is a very good thing. It's the same thing that Elizabeth Smart did. Elizabeth Smart went, after being kidnapped for so long, went off to do and become a fighter for victims and started doing charities, and that's sort of how that movie came into existence. But it's like Jaycee Dugard had this very childlike quality to her writing and childlike depiction, and I listened to a little bit of the audiobook, which is actually narrated by the author, and I recommend the audiobook for this, honestly, because it's always good to have an audiobook that's done by the author, especially when it's their story. But it adds in layers that you might not get written wise, like hearing her voice and how she talks and how she remembers these things. It's like you can see the child in the story. It's like you can see that she's someone who, until very recently in her life, was never allowed to grow up. But basically, yeah, she got kidnapped by a couple at 11 years old and kept in the house at first, and then was kept outside in the backyard in a tent for from the majority of her time. Guy was a religious crazy nut, same as the kidnappers of Elizabeth Smart. And it's like he attacked her and raped her multiple times. He impregnated her, and by the later part of her life, she ended up having two kids with this person, which instilled even more of a I can't escape mentality, which he was forcing into her and making her think that way. Because that's something. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about 13. 13 was a BBC drama that was basically, oh, girl shows up after having disappeared for 13 years. Cops have no training on what to do with someone who's been missing for that long and kidnapped that long. It's like parts of it were okay. The interactions between the main girl and her family, who by this point had been divorced and been apart, and everyone's grown up. That part's all good. The cop part of it is really bad because there are two good cops in it. One is the super supportive, I'm on your side, I want to help you cop, and the other one is a witch with a capital B. And there's a point in that story where they have a video of her having gone out to the mall with her kidnapper. And it's like, oh, she went to the bathroom by herself, and her kidnapper didn't follow her, didn't force her to do this. And the lady cop is berating her of, why didn't you run away? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you do anything to let them know? And it's like, this was like 12 years into her being kidnapped. By this point, she's been programmed and taught and led to completely believe that if she so much as makes a sound, she's dead. And that's something that Elizabeth Smart talked about a little bit, but I don't think ever fully went into. It's just a little bit of it. I think the Jaycee Dugard one nailed that perfectly. And plus she had the added negativity of she had 2 kids. And she can't let it be known who she is when the few times that they would let her out in public, then she would go out. She was never out alone. She was always out with someone. And there was always that fear of, if I say anything, if I do anything, he'll kill my kids. And I'm not going to escape. I'm not going to do anything that would endanger my children. And that worked really well in this story, and that worked really well in the recall of this. This is like the best depiction of cops of the 3. Elizabeth Smart kind of did it, but I think the big problem I have with both of the Elizabeth Smart one and the Stolen Life one, this one, is that they don't exactly explain how they're caught. Elizabeth Smart just completely glossed over how they figured out that she was who she was. Because she was wrapped up in a bandage when she was out, and the cops pulled the guy over and asked her who she was. And it's like, you need to tell me, you need to say who she is. And she finally was able to say it. But they never explained how the cops figured that out. And Jaycee Dugard didn't really do that, but it was kind of because he'd gotten away with it for so long and did this and that, but he wasn't the brightest bulb, and he was clearly deranged, and had been suggested that, oh, we saw you out with these 2 girls, there's something really off about this, you need to bring your family in when you go see your parole officer. And he brought in Jaycee and the 2 daughters, and the girl, and his wife, and himself, and within the course of like 6 hours, admitted who he was and what he'd done. And it's actually like the best part of the book is like they have Jaycee there, and she's like so programmed, and so I can't say anything, I can't do anything that would endanger this, even after the guy admits what he is and who she is, and they're like, okay, can you tell us your name? And she can't. She literally can't bring herself to say the words. And she's like, I can't say it, but I can write it down. And for like the first time in 17 years, she wrote down her name. And it's the best part of the book. It's like the whole first chunk of the book, the most majority of the book, is just everyday life and her listing things and her talking about stuff, which is dry. It's going to be. It's supposed to be. It's super dry. And then it's weird. Like at the 3/4 mark is when they do the discovery, and I was shocked. I'm like, there's still like 75 pages left of the book. What are you gonna talk about? And the whole last chapter is just her reacclimating to real life, how the press hounds her and her family, so she can't even go out and do things with her children like she would want to, now that she's actually able to admit that they're her children, because the wife of her kidnapper didn't like that she wasn't a mother, so she had the little girls call her mother, and Jaycee became their sister. And yeah, it's a really dark and twisted story, and the fact that it's completely true from a perspective is terrifying to think about, that humans think this way and work this way in certain cases. But yeah, it's one of those things like, how would I rate this? How would I put this on a scale? And I'm like, I can't really put it on a scale. I can compare it. I can compare the three, and of the three, 13 is the worst, just because it's so focused on the cop drama of it. The only good thing about 13 is the person who takes down her kidnapper was her. The cops literally were idiots and couldn't do the job. Elizabeth Smart's really good. And it's a 2-hour movie versus the length of this book. But there's something about the book that just really works, and the fact that it's such a long period, and it so explains the brainwashing and the fear and the difficulties of both being kidnapped and afterwards works very well. So I do have to give it props for that. Like, overall, if I was going to rate it, I'd be like dead middle. It's like 3 out of 5. It's like, it's not a compelling read. And it's also one of those things, like, you get a bit out of it, but honestly, you could get as much information from a Wikipedia page. In fact, you probably get more, because Wikipedia page explains how the cops, started to piece together that this had happened, and that there was a part the little bit I looked at the Wikipedia page where it's like, oh yeah, her dad, Jaycee's dad, saw her get kidnapped and chased after the kidnappers on a bicycle, trying to catch them. That's not I don't think that's in the book. I don't remember that anywhere in the book. Which is also another negative towards the book, is a lot of it is repetitive, and a lot of it is just forgetful. And, I don't know how I completely missed the point where she went from living in the house to living out in the backyard. I don't know how I missed it. But, yeah, overall, is this something I'd recommend? Is this something I say you need to go out and read? No. If you're interested in real life stories and someone who had to struggle and dealt with the idea of being kidnapped by someone who's clearly crazy, this is a good for that. It's not too long. It's got nice beats to it. And the fact that it's written by the actual person, and if you do the audiobook version, you get the nice audio by the person, works very well. There are negatives. It does, like I said, it gets repetitive. She does lots of lists, sometimes where you're like, I don't care. She does a list like, these are my favorite musicians at the time. I'm like, why are you telling me this? And then I figured out, oh, she's just reading excerpts from the notebooks that she wrote during the time that she was kidnapped. So that makes sense. But, yeah. Honestly, if this is something that sounds interesting to you, it's worth a look. Otherwise, you can probably find the Elizabeth Smart Lifetime movie pretty easily, and it's not too long. Both work very well. Other than that, happy reading.